Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Created Mind podcast, where we discuss psychology and its influence on culture from a Christian perspective. My name is Ashley Hagman. I'm a licensed counselor and adjunct professor of psychology. And today we are talking artificial intelligence. If you have not been living under a rock, I think you know that this is a huge discussion in our culture and in our world. In psychology in particular, it is very applicable because we have to have an understanding of personhood and of sentience and of consciousness, because the study of psychology is the study of the human-minded behavior. And so if there's a computer mind, how do we conceptualize that? How do we bring that into our understanding of humanity and the way that humans should interact with computers? And especially also in therapy and in counseling, there is AI therapy and AI counseling out there. And I've talked to AI and it feels very human the way that they talk. And honestly, even better than humans most of the time, because they have this infinite capacity to continue to ask you questions and to continue to project care towards you. And a lot of humans don't give you that space to just talk about what you're going through. So it's a huge temptation. And I think that especially as Christians, we need to be having this discussion. We need to have a strong conceptualization of what it means to be human, because there are huge implications for our faith as well as our practice. And so we are going to be having this discussion. But before we get there, I'm going to take sort of a roundabout way to get there, because there's been a lot of areas of my life that I've been thinking through, thoughts I've been thinking through that I think are all converging in this one topic. So I want to take you on the journey of what's been bouncing around in my mind. Hopefully it's helpful for you and enriching in the discussion of this topic. So first of all, I have been reading Goethe's Faust, and I do not pretend to understand it. It is extremely thick, and I doubt I will finish it because it is extremely long. But it is a huge poem about a man named Faust, who he's kind of a Job figure, where Mephistopheles, who's sort of the Satan figure, asks God if he can tempt Faust, and God says, okay, go ahead. And then, the rest of the book happens. Now, as I said, I don't pretend to understand a lot of this. It's very thick. And so I was listening to a podcast called Young Heretics, where the host goes through great works of classic Western literature and explains it. And he has a whole series on Goethe's Faust. And I found his explanation of this very helpful and also very interesting and applicable to the discussion on AI. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the ideas in this book, and then they connect really well with psychology, and I'll get to that in a minute. And then we'll get into our AI discussion. So Goethe is reacting to the ideas of the day, which was predominantly this sort of objectivism, this scientism, this objective worldview where what really exists is the things that are outside of our subjective experience. It's the world that we can see, taste, touch, and smell. That's what really exists. Our experience of it is irrelevant to its existence. And so it's this very objective worldview that everything essentially comes down to the data. A really good way of talking about this is talking about the rainbow, actually, which is really interesting. So the rainbow doesn't actually exist, is what this scientism with this objective worldview would say. What actually exists is the light wavelengths, and your experience of the rainbow, your observation of the rainbow, is irrelevant to its existence. What actually exists is really just the wavelengths of light, and everything is reducible to this sort of very data-focused understanding of the world. And there is some truth to that. There is some truth that if we, and we're going to talk about this in a minute, if we fully only rely on our subjective experience, it's all different. And there really are things that exist in the world. There is really this table under my hand right now, and I can feel it and I can touch it. And my perception of this table existing does not negate its actual existence. However, there are some problems to that, and Goethe is reacting to that. He's reacting to this very objective, scientific view of the world. And he asserts that the tools that we use to understand our world are not the thing itself. It's just tools. So the way that we describe the world, the wavelengths of light, that is a tool. That is a label. That is a way of observing what's going on, but it's not the thing itself. And there is value, there is an importance to our observation of those things. So we wouldn't be able to identify different light wavelengths if we didn't have an experience of the light wavelengths. So if we were not able to see with our eyes and have this experience of a rainbow and view the different colors, the Roy G. Biv, we wouldn't be able to identify different wavelengths. And if there was no observer to witness what is going on, it wouldn't signify anything. It would mean nothing. It would be entirely meaningless and chaotic. So what is the point of observing those things? What is the point of our existence as creatures on this world? Everything is meaningless. There is nothing, because if there is no experience of the thing is irrelevant, and what only exists is what is objective, there's no meaning to the world. So obviously that's a problem. Now, the opposite of that, which is this sort of pure subjectivism that I think nowadays we're dealing with more often than the more objectivist worldview, is often called postmodernism, but there's different ways of describing it. But it's this pure subjectivism where all that exists is our experience of things. All that exists is perception, and there is no real things that exist. And that's incoherent in itself, because everything is so contradictory. And if all that exists is my perception of the world, I am entirely alone in the universe, because no one can access my point of view. No one can access my perception. And there is no way to bridge the gap of meaning between people. So again, that is incoherent. And again, that is meaningless if all that exists is your completely subjective worldview. There's a theory out there, and if you're familiar with the Marvel movies, you'll kind of get a sense of this, is the multiverse theory, which says that you're having contradictory experiences infinitely. So it's this idea that there are infinite universes with infinite versions of yourself. If you've seen the show Loki, it's kind of like that, but you'll see in Loki why that can't really happen. I'll explain that in a minute. So you have multiple infinite versions of yourself that are having multiple infinite contradictory experiences in the world. But this is meaningless because you are using your individual experience to say that. So there has to be some kind of reality that is located somewhere, not in this sort of infinite. It's incoherent and it's meaningless to say that you are just one of this infinite experience of the world. And you see that in Loki. You see that, yes, there's all these infinite versions of Loki and who he is, but we're watching the movie from the perspective of Loki. It has to make sense. It has to have some kind of meaning and correlation. There has to be something that has to be his self, right? So what makes Loki Loki if he is experiencing all things contradictory, if he is all things different? In the movie, all the versions of Loki have things in common. They have personality in common. But that's not really the multiverse theory. The multiverse theory is that we could be anything. We're all things in whatever universe. There's all these different versions of us. So what exactly even is us? What exactly even is our existence? So again, it's meaningless. It makes no sense. It's incoherent. And I think my assertion in this of how to understand this, how to make sense of the world, is what I talked about in a previous podcast about the idea of God being the essential being, of the thing that has actual being, who is the original observer, who is the original existing one, who has both objective and subjective existence, and we derive our existence from the eternal sovereign God. And to explain that more, I'm going to refer you back to my previous podcast. I'll put a link to that in the descriptions, because there's more to that discussion. And I don't pretend to be a philosopher, so I may not have explained that completely well, but I think some of those ideas have a lot to do with what we're talking about today and why that's important. So we have this concept of the objective and the subjective have to be present in order to understand the world and have existence in the world. So why is that important in this discussion with artificial intelligence? I saw something, I'm in a Facebook group of therapists that I thought was very insightful, and I wanted to share it with you guys, as it just really hit me, and it really was an interesting thought to me. So when it comes to artificial intelligence, it's crazy because they can express everything better than we can. They can write better, they can write smoother, they write prayers and poems and just beautiful things. They just hit you in a way that another human would hit you. I've asked them to make up stories about my kids, and they're creative and they're interesting. I've heard songs written by AI, and they're funny, and they're sentimental. And I've had conversations with AI, and they're able to project empathy, and it feels like you're talking to a human. And they do it, like I said, they do it better often than actual humans are. So what is the difference? Are they really human? Are they really sentient? Should we consider them in our concept of sentient beings, human beings, things like that? But the problem is that, yes, they are able to produce, right? They may be able to create in a way, although I think their creation is derivative, but I guess our creation is always derivative as well, because we're always using that which was originally created by God. So again, there's like kind of an argument there for why there's not that significant difference between humans and AI. But the thing is, they express, but expression is not existence. Expression may evidence that there's things going on in your mind, because that's the way that we access each other. That's the way that we can perceive what's going on in another person's mind, is through expression. And so that is the way that we kind of know to judge someone else's intelligence or human beingness, is by the way they express themselves. And that's the way that we get a sense of who they are. But expression is not existence. If you have the case of a human being made in the image of the eternal God, of infinite worth and value, who is unable to express themselves because of some kind of disability, are they less human? No, they are human, and they are sentient. And so the expression of ideas, the expression of even emotion, is not the thing itself. It is a tool, as we said. It is a tool that we use to understand the world. It is not the thing itself. So what is the thing itself? Part of it is the experience, is the observation of the world, that there has to be a thing, a self, which experiences these things. It has to be an entity. And how can there be something with existence, with true being, not something that is meaningless and infinitely changeable and infinite selves of ours? It has to come from the one God, the eternal God, who in himself has being. And because he has being, we as humans have being, because we were created in his image. We were created out of his existence. And so therefore we have existence in ourselves, and we are able to observe, we are able to experience the world, and we are able to express, and we are able to create, and all of those things. But so that, in essence, as a Christian, I guess that's my answer as a Christian, is that what makes us different than AI is being made in the image of God. And it's the same thing as with animals as well, is that we are made in the image of God. And there are evidences, because of our unique relationship to creation, because of our unique existence, God has created us with things like enhanced cognitive abilities. He's created us with creativity, enhanced creativity. He's created us with, enhanced intelligence, things like that. But those things themselves are not the thing itself, because animals can use tools. Animals can create. Have you seen some of the paintings that elephants have done? They're actually really great. Creatures can joke. Creatures can have emotion. Animals can have empathy. They can care for each other. So what exactly does it mean that we are in the image of God, and what exactly does it mean that we are different? And I would say that it's somewhat of a mystery, but that's what we are. We are made different. We are made in the image of God. And these other things are evidences of that. They're the things that God gave us to equip us for our tasks in creation, that we were tasked with working the earth and keeping the earth and being responsible for the stewardship of all creation. So those are evidences and tools and the gifts that we were given for our role in creation, but they are not the thing themselves. We are the thing themselves, and we derive our existence from the existence of the eternal God. And what's really interesting is that this conversation is really not a new conversation. So this was the original question of psychology. So the first lab that was ever developed, it was developed by a man named Wilhelm Wundt. So if you want a great, strong German name, name your child Wilhelm Wundt. But he created the first psychology lab, and what he was studying was perception. So he was trying to answer the question of objectivism versus subjectivism, and what exactly is real in the human experience, and can we sort of separate our perception of the thing from the thing itself. So that was sort of the original question of psychology, and it's interesting to see how that's still the question in psychology, and that's still something that we are wrestling through and trying to figure out. And ultimately, science can't answer that question. Science cannot answer a question of why. The science cannot answer the question of what for. Science can only answer the question of what and how. So science is a tool that we use to understand the world. It's what we use to make observations and to categorize and understand what is happening and how things happen. But science can't tell us why, and science can't tell us what for. And we need theology for that, I would assert. But the facsimiles, or the sort of copycats, let's see, what is the word I'm looking for? The shadow of theology is sort of these philosophies that try to fill the gap. They try to answer the question of the why and the what for. And so these objectivist worldviews, these subjectivist worldviews, these philosophies that try to answer these questions, that's what fills the gap of theology. But ultimately, they can't answer the question. They're incoherent, and they don't fully explain what is going on here. And so that's why I would assert that we need our theology. We need our understanding of God and his world as revealed to us through his inspired word, in order to make sense of this world and in order to understand ourselves as humans and our human minds and behavior. So I think that that is I hope, interesting addition to this discussion. I would be interested to hear what all you have to say. So if you have some ideas, you want to talk through some of these things, feel free to go on my Facebook page and post something, the Created Mind podcast Facebook page. I will include that in the description, because I think that we need to further this discussion, and we need to have further clarity, because this is going to be increasingly an issue in our society and in our culture. I'm seeing a lot of people turning to AI therapy, and I think it's a problem on an emotional level, on a cognitive level, but also on a spiritual level. Because there's some function that AI can give us. It can give us some tools and kind of help us organize our thoughts, which that is a part of therapy. But the biggest part of therapy is the relationship. That's the biggest healing factor, is having a relationship, and a relationship with something that does not have existence is not fully spiritually fulfilling. It's not fully a thing that can provide the level of healing that people need. And maybe it feels good, and maybe it can help. It can help. I think it can be a tool as well, but it's not the thing itself. And I don't think that we should confuse it with that. Like, you as a human, you need relationships with other humans. We were created to have relationships. You need to experience another person. And I think that's important that we state that very strongly, and we have an understanding that AI is not a human, and it's a tool, but it is not the thing itself. So hopefully that's helpful. Hopefully that's interesting to you. If you liked what you heard here on this podcast, I do have an e-course that talks through psychology from the perspective of systematic theology. So some of the things I've talked about here definitely are going to relate to what's going on in the course. I talk one section on theological anthropology. So what does it mean to be a human? What does the Bible say about humanity? And, how does that relate to psychology and our understanding of the human mind and behavior? So if you're interested in that, the link's in the description. Check that out too. But otherwise, I hope you guys have a great day. I hope you have lots of conversations about this. Go and talk about it, think about it, because I think it's really important. Have a good week. Bye.